Hey guys, so we're back. So did not upload last week. This was a crazy week, and then I ended up not feeling well, and so I thought I wasn't gonna record this week, but here we are. I also, and I say this, it's cyclical for me, this thing that I go through where I'm just like, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. I'm going to get off of social media. I'm going to get off of YouTube. I'm going to just not say anything anymore. And the first time that happened, I deleted my entire everything and regretted it and went back. And then the second time that happened, I just kind of edited myself and was like, okay, what do I want to share? This time I'm pushing through and I'm like, this is my idea that I've had, and this is the kind of stuff that I like to watch. So I'm just going to focus on that. So that's what we're doing. We're focusing on things that I personally gravitate toward, just because I feel like that's what's going to shine through the most. So if you guys are not subscribed, please subscribe. Please, like this video if you enjoy it, comment below, share with friends, do all the things, and please, please, please continue to support, because this is amazing, getting to see the people who come and watch, and it's not much, but it's something, and this is really just a hobby for me. I'm not looking to become famous. I'm not looking to be a celebrity. This is kind of like my digital diary where I just come on and give my opinions because I want to. And it just is fun and cool. And I think some of these things are really interesting. And there are things that, like I said, if I saw a video about this, I'd be like, we're watching it. So it's just the kind of stuff that I personally, like, if you looked at my watched list on YouTube, it would be things that are similar to the things that I'm talking about. But I also am trying to find things that, like, people don't really talk about all the time. So, like, you don't really hear some of the topics. I guess you would say topic, not necessarily the actual individual content is I want it to be obviously things that you haven't heard of, because otherwise it's like, oh. But, like, the general idea of what I want to talk about is things that I gravitate toward. If that makes any sense at all. But yeah, with that being said, we're just going to go ahead and get into the whole reason why I'm here today. So today I want to talk about something that is literally not that big of a deal. It's literally not. None of this stuff that I'm talking about really is that big of a deal. Some stuff I might throw in there, but this is kind of a irrelevant, I guess you would say. It's just not important. But I want to talk about it because it's something that I think we need to pay attention to, and like we need to be aware of, because this is happening a lot. So I think it's something that we need to be, like, I guess, aware of. Only because, emotionally, I think that's something that we need to. But we're talking about the issues that I'm noticing in these nostalgic rewatch podcasts. Very niche, I know, but let me explain what I'm talking about. So, originally, I had found the first rewatch podcast that I had ever found was the Gilmore Girls rewatch podcast with Scott Patterson. Great podcast. It was a little overwhelming for me after a certain point, so I didn't end up finishing it, but it's fine. It was fine. But then these nostalgic ones started to come up, and there was the Boy Meets World podcast. It's still going on. I grew up with the show, so it was something that was very special to me. Also did recently the Seventh Heaven rewatch podcast, which really started to spark what I want to say. So And then I want to finish out with one that I have talked about before, but I want to just reiterate and kind of go back into like what I'm talking about. So I've noticed, and I've listened to a couple of other, like the One Tree Hill podcast. I went through and kind of like checked out here and there the like Full House podcast. I've seen different things like that. And it all kind of starts out the same and ends up being the same, where they start out, they're like, I had such a great time on set. Everybody was so awesome. And we were just like a family and we just loved each other. And it was just not like any other set. And oh my gosh, it was so good. And then they go through the pilot and oh, it's such a great show. It's such a great episode. And then you get about halfway through the first season and the cracks start to show. You start to see where it's almost like they are making fun of the show, making fun of the writing, making fun of the time period, and this joke didn't land, and oh, that was definitely of the time, and we have to completely dishonor and degrade something that was really beautiful. And then we get into second, third season, and we start to see where they're just talking about stupid stuff because they want to literally just besmirch the entire show. Where they're talking about how they couldn't stand it, they wanted to get out, they wanted to go home, they wanted to be done, they didn't want to do it anymore. And it's just constant negativity. And for me, it's like I listen to podcasts like that because I want to hear about the episodes. And I want to hear, oh, we made this. This is how we did it. And if you're having that much of an issue and that's that much trauma for you, maybe it should be a different kind of podcast. Because for a rewatch podcast, that's not what we're doing. Make it be a podcast. Like, if you have to talk about it, make a podcast and say, like, we're talking about the struggles. We're not talking about the show. We're talking about the struggles. And then that's your opinion, and that's fine. But it just doesn't, to me, it doesn't make for a good rewatch podcast. Personally. It just is something that I think for me, it doesn't work. It doesn't feel comfortable. And I don't think that makes sense to me. I want to hear about behind the scenes. Like I said, I want to hear, how a scene got made, or did you use a stunt double or did you not? Or did you use a rain tower on this scene, or was it raining, or did you, drive that car down that strip of road, or did you actually enjoy working with this famous person who was, a guest on your show, or was it a little more rough, and that's fine. That's, I don't have a problem with that. But when you get into constantly talking about how you didn't want to be there, we can tell the attitude. And it just doesn't make for a welcoming place. It's almost like when you go to someone's house and they're clearly not doing well. Like, clearly there has been a fight. There has been a scuffle. And, like it's a married couple. You go there. There's a scuffle. Something happened. And looks are being exchanged and comments are being said under the table. And attitudes are spiking. Absolutely not. I'm just gonna go. And, that's just how I feel. It's just not, I don't feel welcome. I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel like I need to be there. Same goes for this. If you're constantly sitting there like, yeah, that person, oh, I remember that. Okay. It just doesn't feel right to me. And if you're making a podcast to air your dirty laundry and to be angry, I don't think that many people are going to want to listen. Especially when you're calling it a rewatch podcast where we're talking about the show and the time period. And it's, especially the 90s, it was such a transitional period because as you ended the 90s, you went into, the technological age and, started getting more and more as the 2000s went on into the internet. And, somebody made a really good point that those of us who were the elder side of millennial, that not Gen X, but not Gen Z, I say Gen Y, that in between, born between 1989 and 1994, you remember the changes, and it was rapid. We went from not even understanding cell phones to every single person having one. We went from, the computer was like, on a space age TV show, not that many people had a full on computer. Then we had a computer, then we had a computer with all of these games and functions, and then that, for me, that was where I did school, was the computer. And then I had a MySpace, and then I had a Facebook. And things just progressed as, by the time I was done with high school, it was like you were there. And it just feels so special to talk about, the 90s and when we were kids and maybe every person who was a kid in whatever era feels that way. My mom talks about how she just felt so fondly for that, like, late 1960s sound and feel, because that was when she was younger, and that was a time that was special for her. So, maybe all of us do. Maybe if you were a kid in the 80s, you remember so much more than I would, because I was not born yet, and then kids who were born in the year 2000, they're talking about, the music that I listened to as a tween and a teen. Like, it's, I was like 4 years old, and I'm like, I was like 12. And, I was like in high school when you were a child. And it's like, that's, I guess, where everybody's at, but it just, in saying that, when you put yourself in a place where you're just constantly talking about how awful it was, then I'm not going to want to hear it. I'm not going to want to be there. I just want out. So, in my opinion, it's just not something that I personally think is right. Hey, yeah, maybe that's what they need, but again, then make it a podcast about that. Don't make it a podcast about watching the show. Like, make that the background, and don't call it that. But you're calling it that because you want people to start listening. And you want, because you'll get money from that. Let's be honest. I mean, with that being said, I want to move on to positive. Something that I already talked about it, but I'm going to go ahead and just go into it, because now that I've been listening to this specific podcast for a while, I'm in season 4 now. They're already almost done with the show completely. I'm only on season 4 of the podcast, of them watching season 4 of the show. So I'm behind, but catching up slowly but surely. but the Smallville podcast. So it's called Talkville. I talked about it a while ago. If you are a fan of Smallville, listen to it. I already talked about it, but Smallville came out when I was about 9 and didn't get to see it until I was about 13 when they did a sort of marathon of the first few seasons on ABC Family to get ready for the new season on the CW. And I mean, just from the get-go, it was like, this is an amazing show. I love it so much. Oh my gosh. I had the biggest crush on Tom Welling all through high school. It was like, that was the guy that I like measured everybody against. Like, is he Tom Welling cute? No. Then not. No. And literally all of the movies he was in, I watched Cheaper by the Dozen, like, just the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, I remember how much I love this movie because I was like, and I mean, Hilary Duff too, like, that my mind was blown. And I mentioned this again, in the other video, but I watched the new version of The Fog because he was in it, and I was like, and just, by the way, it's not a good movie. Not his fault. Just not a good movie. It's okay. It's okay. Because he still looked great. And he did the best he could with what he had. Let's just put that there. It wasn't his fault. It was just kind of not scary and not good. And it was like, oh, okay. Even the ending was just like, oh, is it over? Was it over? I guess it was over. Rumor has it he's still looking for Elizabeth. I digress. So yes, I again started listening to the podcast because I was like, is he gonna be on there? And obviously he is. I mean, why wouldn't he be? But so love this podcast because here's the thing. This is where I want to get into it because on this podcast you have him and you have Michael Rosenbaum who played Lex on the show, which let's talk about that for a second because I'm just reiterating myself, but just to put it all in perspective, he did a great job as Lex Luthor. Like, I was not totally well versed in Superman lore, don't get me wrong, but I did see like the idea of who he was supposed to be, and this was totally different than what you would expect. And my brother, who is 5 years older than me, he was a big Superman fan, big comic book fan, so he knew all about it. He was like, this guy's good. Like, he's doing it different, and I like that. And for me, I was just like, I want to know more. And that's because he portrayed it so well. Going back, let's just say that again with, I mean, obviously, I'm older now. I can understand that the man was married. I'm so sorry that all these girls, including myself, were just like, because poor guy just wanted to go home to his wife. But aside from the giant crush that I had on him all through high school, he did a great job on this show. Like, the way he portrayed Superman, for me, nobody else has really measured up to it because he did that good. And everybody's like, but he wasn't Superman. Yes, he was, because Clark Kent is Superman. Like, it doesn't matter which side he's portraying. He is who he is. So this character, nobody could play him the way that he played him. I remember when the Flash and Arrow like teamed up, and there was like I always say Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's not that. But the show that they did where they went back in time on the CW, that group of people came all together, and it was like this big multiverse, you know, Marvel-esque. It's not Marvel because it's DC. I get it. Don't come at me. Big Avengers thing happening, and the timeline was messed up, and they go and they find Superman is on his farm with Lois, and it was him, and I screamed like a literal 14-year-old girl. I was fully in my 20s, like, screaming, and was so excited. So then, anyway, getting into the podcast was so exciting because of that, because I was so glad to hear about the show that I loved growing up, and how nice it is that they are just really digging into the show and talking about the actual episodes, and they're not begrudging. They don't feel, even in the issues that they were having on set, you can tell they just are putting it so well. There's such a poise to it. And, it's interesting because there's so much poise to it. So it's refreshing. I really enjoy hearing the behind the scenes things where, they'll be like, well, on this part, I didn't use a stunt double, but most of this stuff I did. I didn't always, but I usually did. Or I liked this car and I drove it here. That was actually me, and it was exciting. I did harness work. I did, like those things. Those are really cool things to hear, because you get to see kind of the inner workings in the way of the actual production, instead of, all I want to do is go home. And there were moments when there are moments, as far as what I'm hearing, that, you're like, yeah, I really just wanted to go home. I didn't want to, but it was like, there's grace to it. And I think that's what makes it so much better, is because there's grace to it. And I love that you have two guys who are willing to give each other credit without being phony. There's no phoniness to it. It's very organic, and it feels like you're sitting there with them. And to me, that's what a good podcast is about. There's a podcast that I like to listen to called The Rewatchables, about movies, and I don't always love the movies that they choose, so I don't always listen. But when there's a good movie, I listen to it, and I really enjoy it, because it just feels like you're sitting with the people talking about the movie, just hearing about the movie and how, what they thought. And it's really nice. So, this podcast for me, like I said, I'm on season 4. I've been listening, like while I'm cleaning or while I'm doing yard work. Sometimes I'll watch it on YouTube instead. Just depends on what I have to do. And I really enjoyed it. There's so many cool interviews. Got to hear a lot from John Schneider, which was really fun to get to hear that. We got to hear from Kristen Kurok a few times so far, and love her. And, got to hear from Erica Durance, which, okay, let me just say that I had forgotten all about how exciting it was that they were going to bring in Lois. And I remember my brother being like, he's not going to be with Lana, right? It's not Lana and Clark, it's Lois and Clark. Because I was very invested in their relationship, and I was like, I know, but I'm glad that they're cute together, and I'm glad they're okay, they're good together. I'm glad. Like, leave me alone. And then they brought in Lois, and I was like, I see that it works. It works. And it's nice to hear that it worked so well, because they worked so well together, and that she really had fun playing the role. And I think that made such a difference, because, she was enjoying doing something that was maybe out of her character, but fun. And not like, I didn't never feel like it was like cheesy. Where sometimes with these comic-y shows, it can be a little cheesy and it can be like over the top, like, what are you doing? But this was very much different, very much an easy watch for me. Once they brought her in, I feel like it really did make such a difference. And I really liked the banter that they had. Kind of like, they don't hate each other, but they're like, and it's like, kind of like, you feel like they already are connecting right away. Like they're just, it works. And I think that's why it lasted the rest of the series. Like, people were still so invested because it just got better. You had Oliver Queen coming in, which, I mean, that was exciting. It was a big deal. And, that for me was why I got so into the Arrow TV show, because I really liked the character. And, we had The Flash, which is really cool. We had Aquaman. We had, like, it's so cool. So it was just a great show. And I think that's, obviously part of why the podcast is so good. But in light of it being such a good show, it's also nice to hear the actual actors, the real actors, giving so much grace and enjoying talking about it. And hey, but I'm in for the long haul, so I'm gonna continue to listen. And it's now the only podcast like that I'm listening to. So that should be proof. Like, it's really, really well done. So, I mean, again, who am I? This is just my opinion, but I've been rambling on way too long. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Comment below what's your favorite podcast. Do you like other podcasts? I found a podcast about the Riddler that I listened to, and it only had a few episodes, so, but it was good. I really enjoyed it. I also like listening to audiobooks. A couple times I listened. That was pretty cool. I mean, mostly I'm a music kind of girl with my, like, Spotify. I have all kinds of playlists. Stay tuned. More on that later, because there's going to be fun stuff coming with that. But I would like to know what you think. So comment below and let me know if you listen to this podcast or any others. And thanks for joining me. And God willing, will be back next week with another video. Bye, guys.